Preview. Preview.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and here's a pretty good question which is going to have a very unsatisfying answer, so brace yourself, all right? So the question goes, hey Perch, most comics I've read over the years have been Vertigo books, like Hellblazer, Sandman, Swamp Thing, etc. When I went to my local shop for the first time in a while, the only new DC books they had were Batman. I asked the shop owner about older Vertigo books, and he said trade paperbacks sell decently. DC has an incredible lineup of supernatural horror characters. This may be one of their greatest advantages over Marvel, but they're hardly using them. Why? All right. I should add, by the way, that this writer, and I don't know if he wants me adding this or not, but I'm still going to do it. He apparently has a podcast and kind of on kind of supernatural and horror. And so if you're hearing this question, please let me know, and I'll be happy to put the link and kind of promote your stuff. I don't know if you want that public or not, but happy to do it. So just reach out and just let me know. Vertigo. So here's the interesting thing. Here's going to be the setup and then the unsatisfying part right after that. So the setup is, one of the struggles comic publishers have is getting new customers into the door, to get people who have not really been into comics to start collecting. It's a pretty heavy bridge, and as prices have gone up and the direct market has kind of boxed out booksellers and the newsstand and other places, it becomes now quite a challenge. If you want somebody to get hooked on a lot of monthly comic buying, you've either got to drive them to digital or you've got to drive them to a local comic shop that you don't control as a publisher, and you got to get them over the fact that they're going to be paying $5 for a comic, and that's a lot to just out the gate. If you really think about that, I mean it's an incredible amount of obstacles. One of the things that does make it happen, though, is if you can get some content out that people are talking about and serves a really good niche need. When I say niche, I don't mean in a small way. I mean, a segment, a genre. So Vertigo was very successful for DC for that purpose. So if you look at DC in the 90s, there were quite a few people on two fronts that came in and bought Vertigo, who are, not the normal comic buyer, comic reader. The people who are in there buying, the X titles or Batman, that was a segment, and they were, certainly, spending lots of money, and we love them. But Vertigo captured brand new people who are new to comics, but maybe thought of them as, too amateur, too junior. Like, these are a bunch of super powered. It's a boys' fantasy. It's a girls', more boys' fantasy, is what people would say, who would turn to Vertigo and go, now this is something for me. I see this, a grown man in tights running around, not killing anyone, and it's all very above board, which is an unfair description of superhero comics. But if you're somebody who's looking for something more edgy, Vertigo was right there for you, and it brought a lot of those people in. The other group that it captured, and this is I don't think as many people think about this, is Vertigo started capturing people who felt like they'd seen it all. And this is a factor in comics that I think it's underrepresented, is a lot of lapsed fans, people who were buying comics, customers who were coming in every week like clockwork. They started to feel like they've seen all the stories. They've seen everything there is to tell. They've seen it all. There's nothing new here. And so they slowly just back out and stop buying. And right now, I think a decent amount of the criticism and complaints about comics actually fits into this category. It's people who feel like there's nothing new for them. They're watching Batman's origin story for the 50th time. The Avengers are taking on some iteration of, the Masters of Evil for, it's the same thing. And increasingly, as you've seen some comics turn to, well, we're going to, subvert fan expectations, and we're going to have them eating food eating lunch the entire comic and quipping at each other, because that's what the Marvel Comics, studios people like. And that gets old fast too. It's like, oh, another story where there's no villain. But people who fall into that mentality start to just opt out. Vertigo did a great job of saying, no, you actually won't expect this, because it's a completely new genre, because it's a different type of storytelling. It's a little bit more edgy and adult. There's different hooks, different tropes, different parts to the plot that you haven't seen before. So it's going to feel fresh, new, and unsafe. It's going to feel like something that you don't know, where it's coming from, and that really worked. And that was rooted in supernatural horror, more adult type content. And then DC, and here comes the unsatisfying part. So I know firsthand that people at DC came to the conclusion that people were sick of that stuff. That I think the exact phrase was, people don't like that Twilight stuff anymore, is what a DC editor told me directly, firsthand. Now, the challenge with that is that Twilight, I don't know anyone in their right mind who would say Vertigo was like Twilight. And I'm talking about that movie with the sparkly vampire here, uh, who ironically is a new Batman. So everything comes around in a circle. But anyway, so I find that a stunning thought process to say, well, the mass market, people are getting burned out of horror, of kind of supernatural type stuff. And so they're tired of it. For one, I think there is no evidence to support that in movies or TV or anything. I think, we've seen horror evolve plenty. If you're saying that people are getting tired of doing, Nightmare on Elm Street for the eighth sequel or whatever it happens to be, you're probably right. That particular type of movie ran its course. People did get more tired of Scream, and then it went away for a while, and now we're rebooting it. But if you look at like Jordan Peele doing his version of horror as a completely different style, completely different method, did really well. Uh, there's a lot of shows out there. If you look at what's been popular on Netflix and other places, I mean, the idea of supernatural and horror people being tired of it is kind of ridiculous, and it's especially ridiculous when you have several comic writers gleefully copying Game of Thrones. Now, again, I don't think Game of Thrones is like Vertigo either, but it's closer. I mean, it's still in that ballpark. And again, the company just believes that there's no market for it. It's a very niche market, very small market. But the reality is, it's not only not only is there an audience there, but it's an audience that DC in particular, and Marvel for that matter, desperately needs. And you're absolutely right. DC does have an advantage. They have the history in the back catalog. They have some of the cred that Marvel does not in that space. If Marvel is going to spin up a kind of a horror imprint, I think a lot of people would assume it's going to suck because they're owned by Disney, and how committed to Disney are they really going to be, and are they going to do all? I mean, it would not fly well in the shop. The gut reaction would be, this is going to be terrible. You get good creators on it for what it's worth, and it could be just fine, but that's going to be how people are going to look at it. Whereas right now, DC tried to relaunch Vertigo a couple of years ago, and it was a miserable failure. It was a failure because it didn't have, I mean, first of all, the creative teams on it felt very not ready for prime time. And in addition, they decided to steer really heavily into, I don't know, internet outrage. You had Zoe Quinn doing a book, and it's just, the problem is whether or not Quinn can write a good story. And from what we could see, the answer was she can't. But regardless, that name is radioactive. It's not going to work at all. There's a certain mentality that's going to come from people. So they played to what they believed was a bunch of Twitter people who love, Quinn and some of the other creators who are on those books, and it was not seen as, hey, it's supernatural, it's horror, it's a little bit of a more adult edgy storytelling. Instead, it was, these are books designed to play to Tumblr and Twitter, and again, shock of shocks, it turns out those people largely don't buy comics, and so the sales were awful, and the line was killed. However, despite the fact that this happened, right now, if DC announced, hey, we're relaunching horror, we're relaunching Vertigo. Sorry, not horror. We're relaunching Vertigo. We're going to give it another shot. And we've convinced Neil Gaiman to come in and do a 4-issue limited series. And Peter Milligan is going to be here, and Grant Morrison is going to be here. By the way, as an aside, Some people were extremely nasty to this channel and everything else because I did a video on Grant Morrison before Grant Morrison, before they announced himself, and hold on, himself as what is it, gender fluid, and I said he. And now keep in mind the video dropped before any of this, so I would have had to be a effing forecaster to know this. But Morrison apparently is telling people he still likes to be referred to as he, him, just for what it's worth. So all you people, because some of you, I got people attempting to strike the channel. I got people who bombed a bunch of videos. I mean, there's a crew that was really outraged because I used Grant Morrison, his stories. It's like, that's not his pronouns. It's like, actually, per the man himself, which is now being confirmed by multiple editors, that does appear to be what he wants. So suck it. Okay. And also, I cannot predict the future. So right now, if I'm talking about Tom King and his work, and then Tom King decides to come out as she, her, I can't go back and retroactively edit all the videos that have been made. So tough. All right. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I got completely derailed. But man, that was some of the nastiest stuff I got over that. Anyway. DC wants to make a big deal out of it. Say we're relaunching Vertigo. We've got these people on it. Dip into some of the creators in the past. Go get Nancy Collins. Go get Rachel. Get some of these people who were responsible for Vertigo in the past. Would love to do it again, and run stories like you had then. Don't focus on Twitter or the internet or being really cutesy with trying to speak that language, and instead focus on very unique storytelling. It would do great. Anyway, that's enough of that. So thank you very much for the mail. Let me know if I can promote your podcast a little bit, and would love to know what you guys think. Vertigo, Supernatural, why don't they do it? Absolutely, they have that advantage over Marvel, and DC is crazy not to exploit it, particularly given they want to grow their audience. So anyway, thanks for listening.